It's really nice to have you on, man. Thanks for doing an interview. I've been wanting to get you on for ages.
Well, I think it's a good series. I've enjoyed the first, what is it, three installments already.
Cool.
Um, unless I missed one that you uploaded recently, but I think they've all been great. And I look forward to having this little chat.
Cool, man. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so with our other guests, we were mainly talking about the sort of social aspect and what people eat and stuff like that. But with you, you've done such a lot of activism that it would be a real shame to focus too long on those sort of like normal discussions about veganism. And I'm
Mm.
just super interested in your activism, and I want to like dive right into um, talking about your pretty interesting career as a vegan activist. And but why don't we just start off just to get it out the way? Like, how long have you been vegan and what do you eat? And then we'll get into the activism after that.
Yeah. Um, so I guess this spring, probably end of May, um, it will be 28 years.
Cool.
28 years vegan. And so I did go to vegetarian first, and it's sort of an interesting story. I mean, it's probably not unique. Maybe it's a bit kind of common. I've heard similar stories. But for me, I was dating a woman, Japanese woman. She was a few years older than I, and we were having dinner together, and just it was early in the relationship, and just to kind of make a little bit of small talk, but also um, just to kind of praise her a bit. I said, "Hey, what's your secret to such beautiful hair and skin?" And her
Hmm.
response was vegetarian diet.
Okay.
And
Cool.
so I wasn't expecting. I was, carnist, full on carnist at that time. So, I didn't expect some. I thought, okay, maybe it's a special cream or something like that. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And but I mean, I was somewhat interested in, finding out because she did have beautiful skin, beautiful hair, and so I mean, at first I kind of dismissed it because I had no interest in changing. I mean, why should I change? I mean, I thought that you needed meat to be healthy and to live. I mean, that's what I was indoctrinated with, as most of us were, that you can't get your protein, I mean, everything from home, to school, to advertising on TV, everywhere, as you're probably as well aware as I am, that it was just meat, meat, meat. You need your meat, you need your dairy, and, all these animal products, and you can't be healthy, you just need it. And so it wasn't even a thought initially to like take that seriously. Her suggestion, she didn't even suggest, she just said it was vegetarian diet, that her beautiful skin and hair. And I didn't even take it seriously at first, of course. But then I guess my mind was a little bit more open to it, and there was probably some information out there already that now, since my mind was a little bit attuned to that, I was able to receive the information a little bit better, but then I started seeking out information. I went to do some research, and at that time there was a radio station in New York City, WBAI, which was a progressive station, and they had some programs on there that were actually catered to a plant-based diet, and one program even had topics that included, vegan issues, and so I discovered that, and I started listening to what they were saying, and it was making sense. It was like oddly making sense. Here I was for 26 years of my life at that time, thinking that I had to eat meat, that it's unquestionable that you had to eat meat to be healthy, to live, in fact. And then here I was getting a taste of some information that was really making sense, and then I started to read some books. I finally got myself a hold of Diet for a New World, which you may or may not be familiar with. It's a book by John Robbins. And
Yeah.
I got up to about the third chapter. I think it was the third chapter. in the book, and they were talking. It was discussing a interview that that John Robbins had with a pig farmer. And anyway, to cut the story short, that really rang true with me, and it became clear to me that reading all this information, listening to people who seemed very knowledgeable about this information, who had been vegan themselves for a number of years and were very healthy, on these radio programs. I realized that I had been duped for 26 years of my life. It was really a shift of consciousness. I mean, it was an awakening. It really was.
Definitely, man.
Because I guess growing up, I somewhat, considered myself somebody who was kind towards animals. We had, cats as pets, quote unquote pets in the house. So, I mean, I sort of kind of saw myself as a person who's kind toward animals, not realizing, that I was kind to certain animals, but not toward others. And it just started to, it dawned on me that, man, I've been duped. And so I went vegetarian. And as I started to learn more and more, I was a big dairy head. I confess. I drank lots of milk, ate lots of cheese, huge dairy head. And so that was tough. All of it was really tough for me to give up. Because I was conditioned to like these tastes, to these, so I can't say that it was easy, but because I had this conviction now, realizing that, okay, I actually don't need meat to live, and I want to be a responsible person, a morally responsible person, so I could no longer, at that time, justify eating meat. And then, of course, I learned about the dairy industry and, the egg industry. So I think that's a kind of a normal progression for a lot of people. For me, it took maybe a couple of months of reading and learning to find out about these other industries and these other cruelties that, that exist, that I was a part of, I was complicit in. And I cut those out too. I mean, I just could not justify it any longer because there's no need for that in the human body. There's no requirement, no biological requirement. So that's how it. That was my basic transition from carnist to vegan. It started from a concern about health, sort of, pretty much, and then it became an ethical issue. And ever since, it's been primarily an ethical issue.
Yeah, definitely.
The icing on the cake is the fact that it's also very, very healthy.
Yeah.
I'm 54, going to be 55 this year.
Cool.
And I feel great. I have excellent health.
Once you know, and the only way to go back is to sort of be like Cypher and like be plugged back into the Matrix, and that's like a really horrible thing to do.
That's a good analogy. I think I agree with that. It's and it's one of the reasons why I find it so difficult to believe that. Of course, you see on the YouTube and on the internet, they identify themselves as vegan, but I think these folks are actually just plant-based dieters. I actually don't think that they were really vegan. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that you can have a particular moral conviction and then just give that up. I mean, I guess I'm mainly talking about the people who flip from plant-based diet to a carnist diet, and then they they become anti-vegans.
Yeah.
It's, to me, that doesn't seem at all like a person who ever was vegan in the first place. They were just plant-based dieter.
Definitely.
You
Yeah,
know,
so sort of equivalent to going and doing humanitarian work in Africa and then deciding to join the KKK or something like that. Just
yeah.
a ridiculous 180. Yeah. So what over the years, in terms of what you've been eating, just to get the eating stuff out of the way, because I know that everyone's going to be super curious about what you eat, because that's one of the things people say, oh, you can't be healthy as a vegan long term, and you need to cheat, or you need to do this or that. So just to get it out of the way, what sort of stuff do you eat? Do you eat like a raw fruit diet, or do you eat like a normal whole foods balanced diet, or are you breatharian? What does it look like?
No, none of the above, actually. I mean, I went through phases where I did the raw thing early on for a few months, but I have never been completely whole foods diet. In fact, I probably, compared to perhaps yourself, I eat a lot more junk than you probably do. So I'm not a particularly whole foods diet. I mean, whole foods are important and they're good, and I do have plenty of whole foods, but I also have, plenty of what I guess a lot of people consider junky food or whatever,
Yeah.
and I have not suffered any ill effects from that.
Well, that's interesting to hear.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who think that like you have to be 100%. Like a lot of people are sort of caught up in the sort of the extreme ends of all the spectrums, and constantly the reoccurring message when I talk to people, even just on, I think this is the 4th episode now of the long time vegan series. The reoccurring message just seems to be, yeah, just don't be extreme. Don't eat only bananas. Don't eat only like junk food. Don't eat only this, or don't do some nonsense. Just be sensible. Just eat a balanced diet. And I think again, you're sort of saying that you eat a bit of junk food, not too much. Whole foods, not exclusively. Fruit, not exclusively, and vegetables, not exclusively. And I'm
not saying I'm not promoting. I don't want to come off as promoting the idea that an entirely 100% whole foods plant-based diet is not good or something like that. I think it is, but I think for a lot of people, especially people who are making a transition to plant-based diet, I think that might be difficult to attain because most people that I know of or that I've come across, their diet isn't all that good anyway. Carnists who are eating, many of them still eat fast foods or they just eat crappy foods at home. So I don't think it's realistic to expect people who are carnists to adopt a completely whole foods plant-based diet, when they make the change over to a plant-based diet or to vegan living, to adopt a whole foods plant-based diet. I just see that as a bit too rigid. So I think that it's good to have plenty of whole foods in your diet, but I'm just not one of those people who is entirely whole foods, and I don't know if it's particularly necessary to be completely 100% whole foods.
Cosmic Skeptic, I'm sure you're aware of Cosmic Skeptic. He was saying, when before I decided to go vegan, what was I eating? I was eating just like McDonald's or whatever, like junk, and I was probably eating terribly. And then when I went vegan, I was like, all of a sudden, I had to become some nutritional expert in my mind all of a sudden, and I had to eat like the most clean, pure diet. And it's like, why? Before I was eating terrible. Why do I suddenly need to just increase the purity and quality? And it doesn't make any sense. Like it seems that no one cares about their diet until veganism comes up, and then the second you say, "Oh, I'm a vegan," everyone's a nutritional expert all of a sudden, and it really just isn't reflective of the way that people normally live, I don't think.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's a great point that you made.
And I think it's good to aspire to eating healthier, which means to eating more of your diet in whole foods. I think that's a good thing to aspire toward that. But I just don't see the benefit of if you're not completely 100% whole foods plant-based, I just don't see the benefit of like being hard on yourself for not doing that. Like I said, for 28 years of my life, soon, within a couple of months or so, I have eaten crappy food at times,
Okay.
And actually, there have been people who have said that because I get so little sleep, I average about 3.5, maybe 4 hours of sleep a day. They're thinking like, how's that possible? You're eating, plants. How do you get all that energy? And then I guess somebody who's a whole foods plant-based advocate would, think that maybe, you couldn't, get so little sleep eating something that is not a completely whole foods plant-based diet. But I'm here to say that you can. Don't, don't be too hard on yourself if you're not like a pure 100% whole foods. It's just, I don't think it's necessary. Although, like I said, I think it's okay to aspire to that. But if you happen to, pop some French fries into the, oven on a cold wintry day, and you're eating some French fries, I don't see that as a problem.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think this perfectionism isn't isn't the good thing. The perfectionism isn't good, but you can aspire to eat healthily. That's fine.
Yeah.
But having an unhealthy perfectionist mindset is probably the hindrance there, and a barrier to long term success. Let's get into your activism.
Yeah, I think it can be.
Let's get into your activism, because you've had such an interesting career doing activism. I really want to make sure we talk a lot about that. And
I wouldn't necessarily call it a career.
well, yeah, no,
Well,
not
no,
career.
not
That
career.
it might have some sort of financial implication there. That's not what I really mean by career. But I mean sort of like your what you've been getting up to, your activism antics, and so you started off. Is it fair to say with hand drawn illustrations for magazines and stuff, or did you do activism even before that?
It's so many years back now that I'm not entirely sure. It may have all been around the same time that I started getting involved with, like protests on the street, fur protests or whatever that were taking place. Here in New York City, there's an annual Fur Free Friday, and so that was a annual big event that activist event that I would participate in. I'd been to other protests prior to that, fur protests and circus protests, things of that nature. It's basically where I would be standing on the street, handing out literature. I guess occasionally throwing inflammatory remarks at the fur store or something like that. In my earlier years, I was a little bit loose with the lips, but and then with the illustrations, so that there was a fellow who was producing a vegetarian. So what was it called? I guess what I can do is in your post and your editing, if you add some photos or whatever pictures that I send you, I can send you maybe a picture of some of the stuff that I'm talking about now in this conversation. I don't have any of the material handy here, but maybe I can send you some JPEGs or PDFs or whatever. But so it
Yeah,
was this
sure.
publication that was like a veggie singles local publication. I think was distributed. No, actually, it was distributed nationwide. Actually, there may have been subscribers in Europe and other places too, come to think of it. But anyway, it was a publication where uh, people who are vegetarian, vegan, could connect just for socializing or for dating, if, I guess if you're local. But also it had articles talking about different issues, ranging from ethical issues to dating, diet and all this kind of stuff. So I don't remember how I gotten connected with the fellow who produced this magazine or this zine, I guess maybe it's a more accurate term for it. It was published maybe quarterly or once every other month. I forget how many issues. And I started doing illustrations. So I guess I figured at some point that using my natural talent to help the community somehow, was a positive thing. And in fact, I think that anybody who has any kind of a talent, they should consider like incorporating that into their activism. So, if you're a musician like you are, of course, I think it's a great idea to use that to the advantage to spread a message, to give a
Yeah.
positive message. People who are actors, I know that there are actors and actresses who use their influence to spread a message. And so with me, it was I had a natural talent for illustration, so I started using that to help this publication. And there was later on there was another publication called Satya,
Hmm.
which was about it was like a it was a how do you say it was a thicker, had more articles. It wasn't a dating publication. It was social issues, including issues about war and so kind of a progressive magazine. It was a magazine, and so I started illustrating for that publication too, and so that was a lot of fun, and it
Cool.
was a good way for me to to help out with the I guess with the aesthetics of the publication, because people did seem to enjoy. I remember it was one of the early illustrations that I did for the veggie singles. So letters would sometimes be published, or I think all the time would be published in both of these journals, and people were very appreciative of the art that they were seeing now in these publications. So that was, it was inspiring some people, some of my artwork. So that's
Nice.
that's what you want to do. You want to inspire people to think about these issues, because sometimes what they say, right? Picture's worth 1,000 words, and I think
Yeah.
the picture.
Yeah, I'll put some of the art that you did for the magazines on the screen.
Mm,
Or I'll probably blend it in whilst you were talking about it just then in that section in post. And but yeah, so some really interesting stuff with the magazine work, and I really like the create. Like, if anyone has like a creative thing that they can bring, then that's something that you can really do as a form of activism. Like, you got Veganimation is another
yes.
channel here on YouTube. He does really great illustrations, like with sort of like, I think it's Flash animation. Maybe it's not Flash, but it's computer generated animations, and they're really funny as well. So anything that you can do, don't think, oh, well, I'm not the best YouTuber, or I'm not the best public speaker. You don't have to be. You can use whatever sort of talent you have to really contribute to the movement in whatever way that you are skilled at.
Absolutely. I used to know a dancer, and she would, I guess, choreograph and write her own dance pieces, and she was with a small troupe or whatever, and I believe that she started to incorporate some messages into that art too. So I think any way that it can be done, it should be considered. Later on, what I would do is I would donate some of my. I would have some of my pieces printed on like canvas or whatever, and then I would hand color them or whatever, and then I would donate them for charities to raise funds, like silent auctions. So that was another way that I can use my talent to raise funds for a sanctuary, or an organization that does good work for animals. So I was doing that too.
Cool.
So,
Really cool, man.
pretty cool, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and but that's not the limit of your work as an activist. You did a lot more than that. So you started getting into more sort of street demonstrations and some other undercover, super exciting undercover stuff. There's a lot of stories to cover. Like so, maybe one of the big things that we could talk about would be, I guess, when you were testifying in court against the circus, right, because of the elephant mistreatment. Do you want to tell that story to the viewers?
Yeah, that was in 2007. Now before that, so I guess it was 93 or maybe 94 that I went vegan. I don't remember the exact year now, and I started really getting into activism. So it took me a while to go from being somebody who lived the vegan ideals within myself to an activist, and so the activism didn't start right away. So I guess maybe 1995 is when perhaps when I started doing, the street activism and participated in some big marches in Washington, D.C. And it was fairly early on, I think 96, when I got arrested for the first time for civil disobedience.
Underneath that wrapping paper was a surprise for police. Lead pipe.
Some of the protesters winced in pain.
I help.
The anti-fur activists chained themselves together and were finally arrested after police managed to cut them free.
And the words are discourage people from wearing fur. Fur is cruel!
There's a picture of me being hauled away by police.
Yeah, I can blend that in as well, yeah. That's a cool photo.
So, early on, my activism was kind of like doing a lot of different things, not only, just kind of handing out literature and, shouting at fur stores and stuff like that. But it got into civil disobedience, and I had been arrested quite a number of times actually for civil disobedience, basically blocking entrance to large fur retailers in Manhattan and in other locations. And then at some point, I decided that's probably not a good thing to keep on doing, because eventually your record is going to get really tarnished beyond a point where, I did not get a felony, any felonies, but I suppose it could have gone to that point eventually. If you repeatedly, doing this type of stuff. So.
Yeah, that's super hectic getting arrested. Like, I've only been arrested once, but I was just taken to the police station and they searched me and then released me. They didn't even, I don't think they even took details or anything. But yeah, I guess, I don't know how it is over there in the States, but I guess if you just like keep getting arrested, like something's going to happen sooner or later. So,
yeah. I mean, I don't think I spent more than 2 days in prison, in lockup. For the civil disobedience, I think I think the 2 days was because I was arrested on a Friday late afternoon, and the judge didn't see you until Monday or something like that. I forget. It was
So you're actually like in the behind bars.
Oh yeah, with other inmates and
Wow.
so yeah.
Yeah, wow. That's,
And then it does go on your record. I think it's permanently in your record, although the lawyer says that employers won't be able to see it, but I think the authorities. I think it doesn't get expunged completely, so I'm not sure about the legal aspects of that. But I just didn't want to do much more of that. I thought there was better ways of contributing to helping the cause, and I did find that fairly soon afterwards, because there was another person who had been also attending these demonstrations, not civil disobedience. He didn't do any of the civil disobedience. He couldn't. He had his own company. He was running a successful company. But we both saw at this one particular circus protest, the person who organized it, she had a company set up a TV monitor, and she would show video. I guess back in that day, it was like a VHS, VHS tape, big bulky, VHS equipment and a TV, because there was nothing digital at that time, not even like Digital 8 or anything like that. This was back in like 97, something like that, maybe 98, around that time. So I and the other friend I was just talking about, who has the business, we were there at that protest, and we both apparently had seen how effective that was to actually show the public what is going on. The public, so there was footage that was taken of the circus animals, confined in these boxcars and or in the violent training sessions. And people would stop and look, and they would get educated. And so we both apparently saw that this was a very effective, much more effective, of course, than just shouting and chanting, and even more effective than handing out literature, which spoke about the same things. The literature talked about all of these issues, but to see it it's a visceral thing to actually see these things. And so, so this person who I befriended, who had the business, he actually had this idea. He took it on, and he developed it into what is basically, I think it was really the first form of video activism. Like a regular video activism. So he started an organization called Fauna Vision, Fauna Vision, Fauna Vision, Eddie Lama, and so he brought together this marvelous idea of bringing to the public the actual images of what is happening behind the closed doors of the circus and the fur farms and all these, the meat industry. So Eddie Lama, he had put this idea together into a mobile, basically like a mobile movie theater. So he took a van and he outfitted it with a large screen TV, large for that time. That time, this is like maybe by the time he had put this whole thing together, 1998 or something like that.
No LCD plasma screens or anything back then, I guess.
No way. I mean, the biggest TV you had was like a 36-inch, and it weighed like 200 pounds or something. So I mean, it was, these are dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So he had this van that he purchased, and he had it outfitted to have this TV screen, and I can send you a link to. You can actually, while I'm talking here, you can actually display it. Video clips of this. Cool. And so he called the organization and kind of this type of advocacy fauna vision, fauna meaning animal, animal vision, and both he and I, we would ride around, the city to various spots, either outside of fur retailers or the circus where the circus was performing, or just, outside of a movie theater. Any place where there was a captive audience, a movie theater where the people are waiting on a long line was a kind of a perfect place to just park right there and show video, because these people had nothing better to do, so they would get educated. And so this was just, in my opinion, really one of the most effective, if not the most effective, ways of getting the message out, to the public.
Definitely.
And, there was actually it was such an effective tool that a film, like a multi-award-winning film, was made of Eddie Lama and this Faunavision idea. And so I was involved with that for, number of years. And Eddie Lama also developed these portable kiosks, these portable video kiosks. And so when we couldn't take out the van for whatever reason, I would go out with these portable video kiosks to whatever location. Sometimes we would use it at a street corner and to petition a candidate, who was running for office, local candidate here, and things like that, to get them to sign on to a particular bill or, issue or whatever.
Lugging these old school TVs around, and you did it with like batteries and stuff back in the day, like portable like batteries, like that weighed a ton apparently, and like all this like old school technology. And like today we've got Cube of Truth and Anonymous for the voiceless and stuff, but you were doing this stuff like 15 years or something, or maybe even longer before that. And but today we've just got like lightweight laptops and like people can just stand there and hold them. But, like back then you couldn't stand them and hold one of these massive TVs. Too heavy. You would.
Now eventually, when the flat screen TVs did come out, I would actually just take so I would, from my home, I would actually lug, like about 150 pounds of equipment on a hand truck, which included a flat panel TV, but also included marine grade batteries, inverters, literature, tons of literature, CDs, blah blah blah, just a ton of stuff. I would actually walk that like 2 miles to the subway station, lug this up and down stairs to get to the subway. When I get off, change trains. I mean, I was so convinced that this was the most effective way that I would every weekend do this. I would go to Manhattan and set up. I got a permit to be in Grand Central Station to set up a table there with my video to show the video, and the fact that it was an arduous task to get there and come back, of course, with all this heavy equipment. That didn't matter. What was really important was getting that message out in this effective way. And I mean, that was probably the thing that I miss most about activism, is doing that. Now I've moved further from the city, so I can't really do that. I don't drive because I have ocular defects from birth, so I was never able to drive. And I haven't found anybody close enough to me that would be able to drive on a consistent, regular basis to Manhattan to do this. But if I had that option, I would definitely be doing that still, because it was really, really incredibly effective. We had people coming up to us because I would be setting up and I would usually have 1 or 2 people who were kind of regulars with me, but I was the main guy behind this now. And so I would be always in the same spot in Grand Central, and then basically the whole day. And then we would see people from week to week, just passengers, who I guess worked on the weekend or whatever, who would say, hey, a few weeks ago I saw you and I took your information and I was watching the video and now I decided to change. I'm,
Wow.
Gave up meat and stuff like that. So we would see people who actually, who this message had a big, big impact on them. In fact, one of the people who stopped by the table to pick up literature, he was a reporter from Primero Impacto, which was the #1 news program on Latin television at that time. And I hooked him up with the person, Eddie Lama, who has Latino background. I believe his mom is Latino. And so hooked them up together, and they did a segment, like I believe it was a 2-part segment interview on Primero Impacto. So it was all stemming from this idea of bringing the video to the public. It all stemmed from that. I think that is a very, very important part of activism. Is because people no longer are like focusing on if you have video, they're going to be focusing on what's happening there, as opposed to focusing on what shoes are you wearing? Like when we would just be protesting, holding signs, the attention was so easily diverted at what you're wearing your leather shoes, and of course we were not, of course. But with the video, it's so engaging that that people are that the public is actually so much more focusing on what is actually happening to the animals than they are with what kind of shoes you're wearing or something like that. Silly stuff.
And it must be really rewarding activism as well. If
absolutely.
people just coming up to you a few days later and saying, "Yeah, I've gone vegan now," or maybe I've started eating less meat, or whatever they said. It must be really rewarding seeing these people come back to you and seeing the people stop and look at the footage and really be like, "Oh wow, this is pretty bad. Maybe I should do something about this." And
who knows what impact the television that Primero Impacto, that was on prime time. That particular network reached millions of homes. It was all Latino homes. I guess the audience, their audience Latinos, a Latino program. So I mean, who knows how many people that impacted? I don't know. There's probably no way to tell, but. So, you never know where, there's no limit, I guess you could say, to, doing activism in an effective way, because the reporter who just happened to pass by my table that day, he saw this stuff and I was engaging with him. And then, like I said, I connected him with Eddie Lama and, that led to the interviews and, the broadcasts on primetime, Primero Impacto and stuff like that. So you never know where this goes. And and it's been very, very effective. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. And I think a real thing to this story is you just got out there and you just did it. You just did the activism and you were just like really... just active and really motivated to go out there and actually show people what's going on and really demonstrate to people, look, this is going on. And if you just sort of like stayed at home and was just like, oh, this is an injustice, but you never did anything about it and got out there and did something, then that wouldn't have happened. It would have never got to TV and it would have never changed all of those people's perspectives. And so I think one of the important things with activism is just do it. And this is the thing, like, even just starting my YouTube channel, I actually could have started my YouTube channel, like, in 2011 or something, or 2010, but I didn't start it until about 2016, because I was just like, I don't know, I'm not very good at doing YouTube, I'm not very good at sort of, like, public speaking and all this sort of stuff, I don't know, like, that's not really my thing, and I just constantly gave myself excuses. But I think... you only sort of like live to regret that you don't just like go out there and do some activism like earlier. And to a certain extent, I regret that I haven't done like more street activism as well. I've focused more on YouTube, but I think at the end of the day, any activism is better than no activism. But for everyone watching this who is thinking, yeah, I've been vegan for 15 years, or been vegan for 5 or 6 years, or however many years, and yeah, it'd be really cool to spread the message and really cool to do some activism, but I don't know, that's for other people to do. Well, there always has to be someone to do it, and why isn't that person you? Make that person you, and go out there and do it. And so you've led such a great example in this aspect of just going out there and doing it, and lugging around loads of equipment and heavy batteries and heavy screens, and kitting out a van and driving about Manhattan in this big van, Fauna Vision and all this stuff and everything that's come of it. You just have to go out there and do it, and just want to make it happen, and want to live, want to be the change that you want to see. And I think you provide a really good example of that. So it's really inspiring.
What you just said is absolutely well put. I realized fairly early on, I guess within a couple of years, maybe less than that, of me going vegan, that it only does so. There's only so much good that I can do by just being vegan myself. Like, that's not going to help the animals. I realized at some point that I actually had to share this message, with other people, and that's how, there's going to be much bigger change. So one of the places where I worked, as you pointed out, there are so many ways you can do activism. YouTube is just one, street stuff, whatever, if you're, choreographer in a dance, maybe you can incorporate some kind of a positive message into your, into your choreography, whatever, there's so many ways you can do it. No one way is the only way, but so in this place I used to work, I would put these little, occasionally I would put little information into the mailboxes of not only the employees, but we had some tenants who lived in this building also. I was the building manager at that time, the superintendent. And so I would put into the mailbox this information. And probably about a year after I was doing that, one of the tenants, I was talking to somebody, and one of the tenants was in this conversation, and she said that, I'm vegan because of Louie here. And I had no idea, that she was moved so much to, to change the way she lived. And it was because I found out later, that she had read and took to heart this information that I put in the mailboxes. And I don't know if there was other people that, where this had as big of an impact on them. But I guess the thing is that you never know, so you just do it, and you never know how it's going to change. There's a fellow whose name is Howard Lyman, who is a fourth generation cattle rancher and turned vegan activist. And he made, the news all over in the States, and I think in England, because he testified in a court case. So he had basically, he was an Oprah Winfrey. And as a guest, and he was telling Oprah Winfrey about what he was doing in his former life. When you make such a big change like that, it's kind of like a new life that you take on. And she said something like, "I'm never going to eat another burger again, or another hamburger again." And she was sued. And anyway, so.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I said, "Oprah, we have 100,000 cows a year, fine at night, dead in the morning. We round them up, grind them up, turn them into feed them back to other cows. City of Los Angeles, 200 tons of pets full of chemicals that were used to kill them. 200 tons a month are ground up, turned into feed, and fed back to our food animals." This time, Oprah's eyes are as big as saucers. She turns around and looks at the guy from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and says, Dr. Weber, are we feeding cows to cows? You know, there's a limited amount of that going on. And the next thing out of Oprah's mouth, damn it, gets us sued. Oprah says, that just stops me cold. I will never again eat a burger.
Cool.
So he would give lectures, and I would love to attend his lectures because he was a really good lecturer. And one of the things he would say that I think is just so important, he says that he never counts his audience. You know, in other words, you know, in many of his lectures, there's a lot of people who would participate, but in some of them, there was, you know, let's say a handful of people. And I think somebody asked him, is it worth it for you to come out if there's only like a dozen people out here or whatever? And he's like, I don't count my audience because it's not how many people, because you could have one person as an audience, and that person, you don't know how the impact that you can have, that person can have on other people. So, so I think that's important to keep in mind too, you know, is that, you don't count your audience, and you just never know where your impact will reach, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Try to get the message out. I mean, I'm sure your channel has made a big impact on probably quite a number of people, you know. I mean, I know that I appreciate your content a lot. I think it's really good content, some of the best out there.
Thanks, man. When I made my channel, I didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go with it. I just knew that I wanted to do something. Going back to that thing, just do something. Like, it doesn't really matter what, as long as it's not like disastrously bad. just do anything you can. Just get out there, get the ball rolling, and try and do some activism, because otherwise you just will never do it. And that's what I did with my channel. So I just did this like vegan Wonderwall thing. Actually, before that, I did a video which was like, I was wearing like a hockey mask, and I was like weighing bike components. It was like a Durian Rider rip-off video of like weighing bike parts of like SRAM Red and like Dura-Ace and stuff, and then saying, oh well, I spent like €1,000 on these bike parts which weigh like a bit less, like a few grams less, but actually if I just lost weight, I could save myself the money. And then I'd be faster up the hill anyway than buying these expensive bike parts. And it was like, it was a pretty silly video. And yeah, it was a bit cringe, so I deleted it. So my first video is now what actually was my second video, where it is the vegan Wonderwall thing. And so it doesn't matter. I started with a really bad video, and I was like, this is crap, and I deleted it. But then my second video, vegan Wonderwall, I was like, yeah, it's got something a bit more to it. And then I sort of like started to find my way from there. It started off sort of like just like random strange videos, and then I started getting into more of the informative content. And I think now my place in the YouTube community is just like putting out sort of like seeds of sort of information and ideas and concepts which other people can then take and maybe sort of be inspired by it, or I'm just like putting out information there and trying to spread some information and sort of like trying to change people's minds and just put information out there. And I don't know whether it's a success or whether 10 people have gone vegan or 100 people or 1,000 people because of it. I don't think it's 1,000, but any sort of like positive change that I can make from my channel is worth it. Is worth doing. And so whether my channel is good or bad, it doesn't really matter. It's just the fact that I'm actually doing something, trying to be positive. And I think anyone can do it. If I can start up a YouTube channel, I had like I've talked about this in other videos, like issues with communication, and like I was scared of picking up the phone. I was scared of making a YouTube video, and that's why I didn't start my channel, because I was scared of doing it. I was too nervous to get in front of a camera. And now I'm pumping out videos all the time. I'm like, what was I scared of? just do it, and then you'll overcome that, and then and then definitely you'll find your rhythm pretty quick, and then before long you'll really enjoy doing the videos rather than being scared by doing the videos. But yeah,
I think that's great.
Sorry?
I was going to say, I think that's a great point, actually. I am an introvert. That is just my nature. You know, I've always been an introvert. You know, but like you said, you find your place. Like when I would, you know, be on the street advocating for the animals, and engaging with people who would come up and ask questions about the video that they were watching, and I would talk to people. So one would think, that I, as an introvert, somebody who was so introverted as that I could never engage the public, but you sort of, you find your place, and like if I can do this, if I can go on the street and engage the public and do that, I think that anybody can, because really, I do consider myself a real hardcore introvert, but I was able to find that spot and to advocate for the animals, so I completely believe what you're saying, that at first that you were kind of nervous about this. I get that, because
yeah, definitely.
Now before I get into the to the court case thing, which is it's a fairly brief kind of story, I do want to just touch on. So there has been there's as we discussed, there's many types of activism that you can do. One of the types of activism is something that is highly illegal. Things like releasing mink from cages and other things. Now, I have done stuff that I will not talk about.
Okay.
If you do get into something like that, you want to just be quiet about it. You don't want to give any details about it. But this sort of also leads to the court case, the Ringling Brothers court case in 2007, because Ringling Brothers had come to different parts of New York, including Long Island. And so, without going in too much detail, I had connected with somebody who, we wanted to film, Ringling Brothers kind of behind the scenes. And so I was kind of, known as the camera guy, because a lot of times at these protests I would, take my camera with me and I would film, instead of advocating, or sometimes would, go away from the advocating and just take the camera and, just kind of film the whole thing going on. So, so I was asked to go with this other person to film some of the animals in the boxcars, because that's where the animals in Ringling Brothers and all of these traveling animal acts, at least the ones that traveled by train, and I think most of them do, the ones that go around the country, they would shove and cram these animals into these boxcars, the train cars, boxcars, and take them from city to city to city, and it is cruel. It is absolutely cruel to do that for so many reasons. But anyway, so I was contacted to film inside these boxcars, and I was able to.
Cool.
This is kind of like, past midnight type of a thing. And anyway, so that footage that I took, some of that footage was actually used by one of the national organizations. I don't remember how they got a hold of it. I may have sent that to them. I'm not sure, but they were using it, and then in some of their more professional video compilations where they talk about the circus and stuff like that. And there was a lawsuit that came up in federal court in D.C. In 2007, and my footage was one of the key footages that was used in that lawsuit to to basically get Ringling Brothers to basically to penalize them for harming wildlife, and so I testified in court about that footage. Unfortunately, the case was decided by the judge against the plaintiffs, because because of I forget how they called it, ruling. It was something about a standing. So one of the plaintiffs was a former circus employee, and
Yeah.
he apparently had been hanging out with somebody who was still in the circus, and so he was deemed by the judge to be not credible or something like that. I mean, I thought that was very weak.
Yeah.
But anyway, the case was ruled in favor of Ringling Brothers, so it didn't work out that way. But I think in the end, and oh, by the way, I would go to different cities at times to testify against Ringling Brothers, because I had seen what goes on behind, the basically the closed doors, and so there would be, like hearings in certain cities where they would take a vote to no longer allow traveling animal acts to come into their city because it posed dangers to the animals, and et cetera, et cetera. So, so that's another way, of course, to advocate for the animals is legislatively, and that was one of the ways that I did it. So, so I think all of these things in the end, as you may or may not know, but in 2016, Ringling Brothers ended their traveling animal acts.
Cool.
And so I think all of this, this lawsuits and the protests, because in the protests, when we had the video, people who were going to attend the protest would actually rip up their circus tickets in front of us after they watched the video and saw what is going on. And so all of this together cumulatively has an impact, and the impact is huge in this case with Ringling Brothers. I mean, really, really big. I thought, initially when I first started protesting the circus, I thought never in my lifetime would I see an end to to an organization like Ringling Brothers, which at that time was owned by a $1 billion corporation, entertainment corporation, and so they had endless amounts of money. Here, we were just, people, ordinary people, trying to just carry a message of compassion,
It really seems like even though they maybe had like the better lawyers or something to get the case dismissed because of a technicality or whatever that was, as you say, it sounded quite weak to get it dismissed. But despite that, the fact that you guys just put continued attention, shone the light on what was happening, just in a continued way with undercover footage, just going there, filming it, just as you say, just normal people, just saying this is wrong, we want to expose this, and just constantly like doing activism in that direction. People say, you're just one person, you can't change anything, it will never change, this is a big business and you can't change it. Well, there you go, they're no longer doing this horrible circus business. So it's false when you think that you can't change the world. You certainly can make a difference. You can change the world.
Absolutely.
And it starts with going out there and doing something.
Ringling Brothers, in their statement that they released, it was either in early 2016 or maybe 2015, when they were alluding to basically closing down their traveling animal show. They in their statement, they talked about how they could no longer financially, it was no longer feasible financially for them to do this because of the impact that, so I don't think that they said it was the impact of the activists, but what I think they did allude to is that there was a number of cities that no longer were allowing Ringling Brothers to perform in their cities, and those bans were as a result of activism. In effect, it was because of activism that it was no longer financially viable for Ringling Brothers to continue this, this circuit around the country. And so it definitely was because of the activism, the hard-fought activism by, many activists around the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Like you can affect change. You can do something, even if you're just a normal person. Just get out there and try and make it happen, and it can happen. Like you demonstrate. And yeah, that's another powerful chapter in the activism you've been doing over the years. And yeah, I think I don't know if you've missed out the part about touring the schools with the movie, or did that come later, or how did that fit in with the schools?
Yeah, so it was around the time that shortly after the film that was made about Eddie Lama and Faunavision, and he actually opened up a sanctuary for not just cats and dogs, but also for farmed animals who were rescued from these terrible places. So this film called The Witness was produced and released in 2000, and it did the circuit, I guess, for these types of small budget films, and it won a ton of different awards. And so, as I was part of this Faunavision and friends with Eddie Lama, we started to. We were, I guess, invited to go to some schools to show the film, and then, of course, to do question and answers about the film. And so that was a great opportunity, and I'd done that a number of times, and I think it was very effective too, because I guess the way I judged how effective it was by the questions that were being asked by the students. And, the students ranged, I guess, from, I think the youngest students we had were maybe, junior high school, which is, I guess, around 14, 15 years old, to high school level. So no really young, no like elementary level, because, some of the footage in there may be a little bit graphic.
Disturbing.
Although I don't think that's necessarily a reason to keep it from young people. I think young people not only have a right to know these terrible things that are happening, but from my experience of showing footage like this, very graphic footage, not in this film, but the other graphic footage of fur farms and the meat industry. From that experience, countless times going out and showing this graphic footage, many young children would actually stop by, and it wasn't the children who were traumatized, it was the parents of the children who were basically projecting their own feelings onto the children. So never did we see a child being traumatized by the graphic footage. It was always, if there ever was a problem with somebody making a big ruckus about, this graphic footage, it was the parents who were saying, you're traumatizing my child. And there was no indication whatsoever that the children were being traumatized by it. And
that's really interesting.
In many cases, the children would, either come there by themselves, and it was the parents that were projecting that onto their children. So I think children, the parents, because I'm sure these parents probably, they were feeding their children meat, and they themselves were eating meat, and so of course, there's probably this guilt going on, whatever, But anyway, so just as a kind of a sidestep there. But getting back to the school, so I think this is also a great way to get the message out, and I found that the question, the question session where the children would ask questions, I could tell how engaged they were by the type of questions and the amount of questions, and there was always good questions and a lot of questions, and I think that was, that's testimony to, to the effectiveness of, this film, The Witness. But the Witness film was predominantly about Faunavision, about showing graphic footage to the public with this van, and so
I think that's a really interesting observation about the parents and the children. I think that's definitely very telling of maybe the guilt or the conscience of the parents. Or I don't know exactly what that says, but it definitely says something quite deep.
I think what it says is that children are not given enough credit. They're by certain parents. Now, there were other parents so not all parents with young children who were seeing the graphic footage were like that, but some were. They oh, how dare you show this graphic footage? And we were in the public, so we didn't have to explain. We didn't have to explain. We were just set up in the public area, so we didn't have to explain anything. And there were parents who had young children who didn't say that, and occasionally there were parents who said, "Thank you for for showing this, for teaching us, for enlightening us, basically." But there were other parents, of course, who I think projected their own shit, onto their children, because their children. I actually have never seen a child, even the young children, who appeared to be traumatized by the footage that they were viewing, even though a lot of that footage was graphic. I think that the children took it in as kind of just a matter of fact sort of thing. They, I think that's the way they took it in, and the parents projected something additional onto that, like kind of thing, like
Yeah. So for the children, it was information, but for the parents, it triggered offense because
that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Like I said, for some of the children, for some of the parents who didn't attack us verbally for this, their children seemed to take this in the same way that the children of the parents who did verbally attack us took it in. So neither of the children seemed to be impacted differently. It was just certain parents seemed to be projecting their shit upon their children, and then basically trying to point a finger at us, like, oh, you're the bad people for showing graphic footage. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, it's reminding me of something that I read in an article that you were mentioned in. About your experience when you were a child. I don't know if you want to go into that, about the pet chicken. Is that something you want to mention?
Yeah, sure. Wow. How old was I at that time? Maybe 14 years old. I don't remember exactly. So one day my father brought home 3 chickens. I think 2 of them were male chickens and 1 was a hen, or maybe 2 were hens and 1 was a male chicken. I forget exactly. And so living in an apartment in New Jersey at that time, and me, my brother and sister, we kind of loved animals, so I guess, just like most children, just kind of love animals. So we were excited to see these chickens, and they kind of, I guess, if I remember correctly, they when they were in the house, they lived in the bathroom, in the bathtub, whatever. But there was like out the kitchen, there was like a small alleyway that I think was blockaded off, and so I think it was an alleyway with grass and stuff like that. Wow, so many years ago. So I think that's where they would spend most of their time. But when they were in the house, they were kept in the bathroom, so they wouldn't kind of fly all over the house. But anyway, and I think we had them for about a week. And so when one day when we got home from school, and we had dinner, I guess, chicken was on the menu, and after we had finished the meal, I guess my father laid it on to us that those were basically the chickens that we had as pets. And we didn't know that because I guess maybe I thought at the time they were okay. They were, outside in the back area in the alleyway or something. It didn't dawn on me because, of course, that's not the first time we had chicken. Eating chicken. I mean, this is, but once I learned, so I guess it became personal, right? It sort of became personal because I knew these individuals now. These were, it was no longer like always before that, when you're eating chicken on a plate, it's not an animal, right? It's just a piece of flesh, right? I mean, that's what, and of course, if you're doing that your entire life, if that's what you've grown up, that's what it is. You just don't even connect it with an animal pretty much. Even though I guess if I were to think about it at that time, of course it comes from an animal, but we were never we were never challenged to think about it in that way until that day, I guess, when we learned that the chickens that we for about a week that we had grown to love, I guess, the kids, it became a personal thing, and but so growing up in my household, it was a very authoritarian household, so we didn't have a choice what to eat. It was like, you eat what we put on the table. That was my father's authoritarian, household. So even if we felt a great amount of sorrow, which I think the kids, all of us did, it didn't matter. Like, there's nothing you can do about it anyway. There was no way to protest. You could, that would not end well for us, as kids. There would be punishment. And so, but I guess it, it impacted me at the time, but still, because we weren't really, there was no way to do something about it. It became lost over the years until, until that time where I had put a lot more serious thought into it when I was 26, when I was dating the Japanese woman. And, when I was able to, of course, have my own free will to do what I wanted, now, in between that time when I was 14, 15 years old till I was 26, when I moved out of home and I was, late teens or early 20s, I guess late teens, I guess I didn't think about it much. I guess it was just, just getting on with everyday life and just thinking, being conditioned to think that you needed to eat meat, and going back to the whole thing that that you have to eat meat, so I guess I didn't think about that, even though I did have that experience with the 3 chickens that we, had for a week, but
so sort of a concept in your mind that lay dormant for those years until you actually re-encountered it, and then you were like, oh, well, actually, we don't need to eat animals. So why am I doing it? And I love animals, so why am I doing it?
Yeah. I mean, that was the bottom line. Once I realized that there's no biological requirement in the human body for animal flesh, for any animal products, then the question became, and I saw myself as a good person, right? As somebody who was, and who was a good person, and I think of myself as at that time I thought of myself as a good person. So how could I, if you don't have to eat animals and what is happening to these animals, they're being killed, and typically in pretty terrible ways, why would I want to make myself complicit in that if there's no need for that, right?
Yeah.
It just goes against all my values that I felt are important, and I think that most people actually have these values, right? It's just that most of us are conditioned into seeing certain animals in certain ways. I think pretty much, at least in Western culture, pretty much the way I was conditioned. I think most people are probably conditioned in the same ways. I don't think I'm certainly not unique in that respect. Now, I think that the more information that gets out there, the more activism that's done, I think we're seeing this effect. We're seeing lots and lots of more people waking up and understanding that that they've been conditioned their whole lives to treat certain animals in one way and other animals in another way, when there's no rational reason to see these animals in such different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. When you just said about the fact that people see different animals in different ways, and certain animals maybe people perceive as food, or certain animals are perceived as pets, and certain animals is perceived as something else, is interesting because you also were rescuing. Not only were you interested in the livelihood of all animals, but you had a specific interest in cats, but also rescuing mice. So mice are an example of an animal which most people don't really care too much about. But if you actually look at their genetic similarities to humans, we're more genetically similar to mice than we are to an elephant or something. So we're actually they're actually surprisingly close, mice and rodents, to humans. And when you actually look at some of the research, you can see that mice can actually laugh, and mice have social interactions, and mice do many of the things that humans do, obviously on a different level. But I think once you start looking into it, mice are actually pretty cool animals, and so you were rescuing mice, right? At one point, or are you still doing that? What's the deal on that?
So okay. So this was at a job work that I had. This is going back, I guess, to around 2007 or so. Around that time, I was working as a building superintendent for residential, big kind of medium-sized residential buildings in the city here, and so in the courtyards, between the buildings, pretty much every day I would find glue traps with mice stuck to them that some of the tenants, would buy glue traps to put in their apartments, and I guess instead of putting them into the garbage, well, of course, some of them I would find some of them in the garbage. The glue traps I was able to be able to tell by feeling on the outside of a garbage bag what a glue trap feels like. But other tenants would just throw these glue traps with mice into the courtyards. That's kind of the way many of these people who lived in these apartment buildings were. They just threw garbage out the windows, including glue traps with mice, and just anyway. So in the mornings when I would come in, there'd be all this trash, including very frequently glue traps with mice, and so I couldn't, as somebody who was been vegan for many years at that point, somebody who's compassionate, I couldn't just do nothing. I couldn't. So what I did was I would find all the glue traps with mice and try as quickly as I could to determine if they were still alive or not, because many of them were either dead already, or in such bad, weak condition that removing them from the glue traps would probably cause them more harm. Now, there is particular effective ways that I have come to develop to releasing mice from a glue trap, and I'm actually thinking of doing creating a video where I'm where somebody will be filming me how to actually do this. Now, I'm not going to use real mice. I purchased these fake mice that look like real mice. So I'm actually thinking of doing a video which would demonstrate how to actually do this. So in case anybody out there who's watching this, in case you come across this in your place of work or in your apartment building, if you live in an apartment building, or if you just, wherever you might be, sometimes people have seen glue traps, and so I'm thinking of actually doing a video to demonstrate how to safely remove a mouse from a glue trap. And anyway, so at this job, I would find these glue traps with the mice on them, and the ones that were the mice that were salvageable, not all of them were, because in the winter, especially in the winter, if they're thrown out, and left out for hours and sub-freezing temperatures, they're just going to die of exposure, right? If not die from just struggling and whatnot. So the ones that were salvageable, who had enough energy and that I could release them safely, I would, and then I would, at the end of the day, I had a place where I could keep them safe for the remainder of the day until I got off of work, and then I would bring them home and kind of rehabilitate them, and then released most of them up in my friend Eddie Lama's sanctuary, where I knew they would be safe, because they were far away from any cats. So I did that for several years. As I was at that job, I would rescue mice, and it was, the ones that I can rescue, and I may have a video of that. I'm not entirely sure. I think I have some video, but the pictures you can show maybe as we're talking about this here. It gives you another level of appreciation for animals that you don't normally think of, right? As an activist, I think about, farmed animals and fur-bearing animals, like foxes and mink, because you're dealing with the fur industry, and circus animals. But, mice, this situation, gave me the opportunity to really, really think about, how our society, views, certain animals, and these animals are actually, smart, they're intelligent, as you said, they're, it's a shame, that, now, of course, I mean, there is some societies, you can find the videos on YouTube where there's a society in India where certain group of folks, they kind of worship, rodents, rats, and that kind of thing. But in most cultures, they're seen as vermin, as and just as a sort of a side note, I think this view of rats and mice as, these loathsome vermin, I think that probably started back, back in the days of the Black Plague, and from what I've read, it wasn't actually the rats that were the carriers of the plague. It was actually the parasites that were on the rats that were the carriers. So the rats got this really bad rap because at that time they didn't realize, it wasn't until I don't remember how many hundreds of years later, that it was determined that it was actually the parasites not the rats themselves that were the carriers of this plague, that ended up killing, untold numbers of humans. But I think the rats got the bad rap for that when they shouldn't have,
Yeah, definitely. And I think, as you mentioned, that there's a temple somewhere in India, and they wait for all the rats to like rock up to the temple, and then I don't know if they like drink the water out of a fountain or something. I can't remember, but it like most people who are watching that from the West might consider that a bit odd, that they're like so willing to like engage with rats and like and be in sort of like conditions with the rats. And I can't remember the video exactly. I saw it like a few years ago, but it is quite an interesting perspective. And yeah, a lot of people see like rats as like filthy or something like this, but then people have pet rats as well, and people have pet mice. And I really think sometimes people need to reconsider the way that they view certain different animals, and stop categorizing animals in like little boxes, like this is food, this is a pet, this is a wild animal, this is some other animal. Like that, I think every animal like wants to live. All life on a planet is worth respecting, and all sentient beings want to live, and yeah, I think we should be a lot more considerate and a lot more compassionate to all species of animals. Obviously, it's not really possible to like avoid stepping on ants sometimes or something like that. But let's just like try our best and sort of be kind and not be like horrible to our fellow creatures. So I think it is a bit unnecessary to, as we were saying about like thinking rats are like these horrible creatures or something. I don't think there are any horrible creatures. I just think we have different creatures on the planet.
I had the opportunity a number of years ago, probably going back at least a dozen years. I had the opportunity to care for 2 lab rats that were I don't remember if they were liberated from a rat or if they were acquired from a lab after experiments were done on the rats. I don't remember the situation, but I took possession of 2 rats, and I can tell you that they are just amazing animals. In fact, my mom, one of the rats, when she would actually rub the rat, it would purr like a cat.
Wow.
I kid you not. It was incredible. It was just, they're intelligent and, they're sweet and affectionate. Now, of course, it's true that lab rats, I believe, are bred to be relatively docile, and so, they're going to be a different personality or temperament than, a rat that you may, see in the street or whatever. But the point is they're individuals, they're sentient individuals, like you said. I think just the fact that they can have an experience, that is traumatizing, I think is good enough reason to consider their lives, right? And then that's basically what sentience is that they can experience pain and suffering and anguish. That they can, I think, means that we ought to, consider not being complicit in inflicting that on them, right? And so, veganism is, about not being complicit in inflicting harm on animals as much as practical. So, you cannot live a life on this planet, I think, with complete assurance that you're never going to, step on a bug or, be inadvertently harming some life, that is sentient. But I think that I think that at least for myself, my view is that if we can choose, to not make ourselves complicit in intentionally harming others, then I think that is the morally responsible way to live.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. It's not ideal that other animals in nature eat other animals. So we mentioned mice, cats often eat mice. So it's not ideal, but and which is one of the reasons why I don't really like the culture of having cats and dogs as pets, because then you let your cat out and it's going around eating wild animals and stuff, which is maybe not the most optimal thing to do, because you've got this one animal and you're feeding this one animal other animals, and then the other animal and then that animal is going out and eating other animals, and it's not the best thing. But in your experience, you've seen success in feeding cats vegan food and or plant-based food, and so I think if you're gonna have a cat, I think where possible, it's actually going to be a really good thing to reduce the amount of harm and reduce the amount of impact you're going to have from having a cat as a pet by feeding it a diet which is not going to impact as many animals as if you were to feed it conventional cat food and let it out to eat all the mice in the local area. So what sort of experience do you have with vegan cat food?
So before I talk about that, I do want to say that I see a clear distinction between what I guess could be called owning pets and having rescued animals. So I have rescued cats. I've rescued cats for many years, and I've adopted out many. Some I didn't adopt out, or they have returned to me because for various reasons. So I do have cats that I care for now, but they're all rescues. They're not pets. I don't see them as pets at all. I would never have a pet. So in the buildings that I used to work, where I would find the mice on the glue traps, there was also in the basements of those buildings during the winter, the basement doors very often would be open, and cats would seek shelter because it was, sub-freezing temperatures outside, but in the basements they can find warmth and protection against, this brutal winters here in the city. So what I've learned is, and I'll tie this back into the cat food. So what I had learned is that the building would basically put these poison bombs into the basements to kill insects, and it would invariably kill the cats because I guess they felt like, some of the some of the other people who worked in the for the buildings, they would complain about, I got a flea bite or something like that, and so to remedy that situation, I learned that they would take this horrible measure of putting these bombs, these chemical bombs, into the basements, and that's how they would get rid of the cats that they thought, I guess, were carrying these fleas or whatever. Once I learned about that, I said, "Are you kidding me? I'll deal with this problem. I'll rescue them." And anyway, that's how the main part of my rescue operation got started a number of years back, is because of these buildings where the alternative was a horrible alternative. They would bomb these basements. So I set up traps and rescued, and in many of these basements, a bunch of different cats. And at one point, I had probably as many as 18 rescued cats in my in my apartment. Many of them were very tiny, whatever, and then I would adopt many of them out, of course. So I was the cat man at one point. I guess I'm still a cat man because I still do occasionally rescue. So I was talking about, there is a difference between pets quote unquote pets and rescued animals. So
Definitely,
people like me who have cats, they're not my pets, so they're rescues, and so yes, it is. So cats are particularly difficult to deal with as a vegan. Now dogs, I think it's relatively easy. I know many people who have very healthy dogs who they're on plant-based diets. Seems to be not a big problem at all for many dogs to be healthy on a plant-based diet. But with cats, they have dietary needs that are different than dogs, and it's tricky, a lot more tricky. But there are ways that you can actually, and I did have when I years ago when I only had 2 cats and then 3. The cats were being fed a plant-based diet with supplement, for the arachidonic acid and the vitamin A and the taurine. So they were getting supplemented. And initially, of course, it would be a transition period of mixing the food with their normal meat-based food and gradually weaning them toward a plant-based diet. And now, I would never put the life of the rescued cat in jeopardy if I knew that it was, that the cat was not taken to the more plant-based diet or the fully plant-based diet. So I would never, and it's of course it's an issue that is probably the issue that I struggle with most is having to buy meat-based products to feed to the cats, and so it's tricky, but it's possible. So I've raised 3 cats plant-based, but once you get more and more cats into your home, especially if you as a rescuer, it becomes increasingly difficult to provide them or to wean them onto a plant-based diet, because the new ones, you can't just start giving them this partial or fully plant-based diet that the ones that you've had for a while are eating. And by the way, I have video, and if I can find it, I'll send it to you, and maybe you can post it, showing it over this talk that we're having here. But I have video of actually my cats, the cats who were plant-based, who are eating plant-based, devouring their food. And one kitty is actually, his favorite food, the only food that he would growl if you try to take it away from him was a plant-based food. No other food that I would give him, no meat-based food that I would give him would he growl if you tried to take it away, except cantaloupe. It was cantaloupe. It's a really amazing thing, and all of them actually liked the cantaloupe. All 3 of the kitties that were plant-based were cantaloupe, but this one particular cat, he growled at nothing except if you took away his cantaloupe, he would be mean, like, you cannot have that, get away from my cantaloupe. It's really amazing. So I'll try to dig up the video, and because I took video. This is many years ago. So it is tricky. It's tricky, but I think it's getting easier now because there is more information out there now than there was 20 years ago when I first, had vegan cats, or plant-based cats, I should say, plant-based cats. And so there's kibble I believe there's kibble that is fortified with the taurine and the arachidonic acid and the other nutrients that the cats need, whereas before, 15, 20 years ago, you had to buy powdered supplement, and that, that had to actually be put into their food and stuff like that. So, but I just want, people out there who may be watching this to know that I would never put the lives of the cats in jeopardy. I would never force them where it's harmful to them to eat plant-based, so I closely monitor it, bring them to the vet for regular checkups and stuff like that. But I do think that I don't think it's a good argument to say that cats are obligate carnivores. Yes, in the wild they are, but if done correctly, the nutritional science is pretty much indisputable now that cats have need for certain nutrients, and these certain nutrients can be supplemented for.
Yeah.
And
So back in the day, you had to sit there with like various different supplements, like mixing these powders and putting it into the cat food. But now you don't have to do that anymore.
I believe now, my cats now, they're except for one, they're all seniors now, and these they're not plant-based. So I haven't really explored in the past several years plant-based because their seniors are very old, and I don't know if it's going to be a really good situation for trying to switch their diet over at this point of their life. Two of them probably don't have more than a year to go in their life, and so but I guess for people who do rescue animals or who have cats, who rescue cats, and who are thinking about this issue, and if it bothers them that if they're vegan themselves, to look into it. There's a lot of information out there, and I know people who have many plant-based cats, and they're healthy. So it can be done, and like I said, I had 3 years ago that were healthy and plant-based, so I know that it can be done.
Cool.
You just have to be real careful with monitoring them, their health, of course. One of the things that can be an issue, I think, even more with the plant-based diet, is the magnesium in the diet, the ash content. So that's one thing that you may have to be more aware of. But I definitely know that it is possible to have cats who are healthy on a plant-based diet. So long as the cats take to it. I would never force them against a detriment to their health to do that, and it's always going to be a transition, of course. Mixing over a period of months, mixing more plant-based foods with their meat-based foods and that kind of thing. With the cats that I had, not only cantaloupe was something that was one of their favorites, but actually green beans was something that they liked, and beans they seem to take to very well. Peas, and then cool. Some of the mock meat, the protein, that kind of thing. And then there was most of their diet was a vegetarian or vegan kibble, actually. So, and there are some good ones out there now. Amy is one, and I know there's like 2 or 3 other brands that I've heard are excellent plant-based kibble for cats.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah, one of the main other people I've heard talk about vegan diets for cats is Hench Herbivore. He was experimenting with that as well, so he's got some information on that as well. But I think generally a lot of people they think, okay, dogs, cool, but cats I'm not so sure. But I really think that people such as yourself, Hench Herbivore, and a few other people have really been like, look, it can actually work. You just got to really know a bit more what you're doing. But you've got to know what you're doing to a certain extent with animals anyway. And you sort of need to know what you're doing with everything. So you wouldn't just be completely uneducated. Well, a lot of people just go to the store and they buy the cat food and feed it to the cat, and that's that. But generally, if you really want to care for the animal that you're looking after, then I don't think it's that much research to really get it right. I would imagine.
Yeah, and their normal diet. I mean, if you're rescuing them, if they're coming from the street or from a home, and they were abandoned, like I have some of the cats that I have here were abandoned in either somebody passed away or they were abandoned in a hallway, whatever, and so the cats would have been fed, probably to almost a certain degree of meat-based food. So, they're used to eating a certain diet when you get them. Generally, in most cases, in most cases, you're not going to find a cat that is already weaned onto a plant-based diet. So, so you do have to read and learn about it and monitor the cat, of course, because it's not something that they were not brought up that way, and so so you have to be careful, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think.
And I would never. By the way, I would never recommend, as you mentioned before, I would never recommend for somebody to get a pet cat.
Yeah.
Because then you're just going to be contributing. More than likely, you're going to be contributing to the meat industry. Now, there is the argument, of course, that, and I think it is a valid argument, that the meat that goes into pet foods is more or less meat that is not suitable for human consumption. So that meat that's going into pet food is a byproduct. Unless, of course, unless you're feeding the animal some kind of a premium type of meat-based food, or if you're feeding them meat that you would buy for humans. But pet food, conventional pet food is a byproduct of the flesh that humans eat. So there is an argument that I think is valid that the contribution to the meat industry by feeding animals meat-based foods is not as significant as one may think. It's not like they're not killing any animals just to make pet food. I just don't think that's happening. I see no reason to believe that's happening. The animals are already killed for human consumption. Now, if we ever get to a point in the society where humans are eating less and less meat, now then that could become an issue, a much more serious issue about feeding conventional pet food, meat-based pet food to animals. I don't know at what point farmed animals would be killed just for making that meat-based pet food. But at this time, I think all of it is byproduct, where the animals are not being killed for the meat-based pet food, but rather for human consumption, and the parts that are not used, that cannot be used, I guess legally perhaps, cannot be sold for human consumption, are being rendered into these commercial pet foods, meat-based pet foods.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's an important point to know. But I think byproducts is an interesting one, because there's some things that people think are byproducts when they're actually not. Like, for example, leather. Some people think, it's just a byproduct, like it doesn't really matter, because obviously they're going to chuck the skin away anyway if it wasn't sold as leather. So you might as well. It's just a byproduct of the meat industry. So there's no reason to not buy leather or something like that. But that's actually not true, because especially in certain countries like in the East, they're just going around killing cows, like skinning them and just leaving the rest to rot. So actually, oftentimes if you buy leather, it's you're actually just buying the leather, and you're paying for the death of the animal just for the skin. And I don't know how widespread that is, but I think that has actually happened quite a lot, where the animal was killed just for the skin. So that's something to avoid. So I think the byproduct argument for pet food is an interesting one, and something that people should be aware of. So maybe they shouldn't feel as guilty or something. Otherwise, if they had no other choice and they had to buy this pet food, but they felt so bad about it, then maybe that's something that they should consider to not feel so bad about. But the same logic shouldn't be applied to leather or some other things, because it's not always the case that it's literally just going to be chucked away otherwise.
Correct. Now, and of course, with the leather and even with the byproduct conventional meat-based pet foods, there's still a monetary component. So these, so I guess the renderers, Purina and whatever renderers that are making these meat-based pet foods, I don't know exactly how it works, but I guess they're paying, these, slaughterhouses a certain amount of money to get those byproduct parts that are not fit for human consumption. So there is a monetary component to this. It's not like, oh yeah, it's no problem at all to feed your animal meat-based foods. It is a problem because I believe you are, by buying these products, you're actually supporting, contributing to the meat industry. Because the pet food renderers are paying, I believe, for these byproduct parts, and so it's an incentive, I guess, for the meat industry, and it is an issue as a vegan. It is an issue that I struggle with at times to be contributing to these industries that I so much oppose. But it's a tough one, especially with the cats. It's a real tough one.
Definitely. Yeah, I think the solution, or the answer at least, is don't buy any pets, especially don't buy any dogs from breeders. Don't buy any pets at all. The only pets that you should have would actually be like if you were rescuing an animal like yourself and then caring for that animal. But don't ever have any pets where I'm just going to, I want a dog, so I'm going to go to a breeder and get a dog. Never do that.
Never. If you do want a animal as a pet, of course, never buy one from a pet store or breeder. Adopt. I'm sure that in probably any major city or close to any major city, you're going to have shelters where there's many animals waiting to be adopted that are just as loving, and who need a home, so definitely adopt, never buy from, never buy, always adopt,
Yeah, definitely. 100% agree. Well, I think this is so far definitely been the longest interview in the series, but it's been a really, really exciting one with the stories from your activism. And
well, you cut it down a lot, of course. Cut out the parts that.
Well, I think it's all been great. It's been really interesting listening to the stories and the activism you've done and your views on the issues we've discussed. So I think I'm going to upload most of it how it is. I'm going to put in some overlays to like the artwork that you've done and some of the pictures you getting arrested. That's a really cool picture. And some of the cool stuff I'm going to overlay, but I think I'm going to leave most of it how it is, because I think people are going to get a lot of value out of watching this. Especially it's going to be really inspiring for people thinking about doing activism and need that nudge to actually get out there and to do something. But before we leave it, is there any last thing that you want to, like, one last bit of advice for new vegans who are watching, what you would say? One short bit of advice for new vegans?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things I could say. Maybe the most important thing is that virtually everyone that I know, including myself, who is a vegan, was not a vegan, so it's not like vegans are, born to be vegan or something like that. It's not like you're meant to be vegan or something like that. No, that's not the case. We were all, I think I know maybe one person who was raised, from birth, plant-based, but virtually everyone that I know who's a vegan, wasn't raised that way. So I'm no different. If you're not a vegan and you're thinking about this whole issue about the animals and and living vegan, you should know that that you're in good company because, like I said, virtually none of us were born or raised vegan, and so you're really no different than anybody else who has gone vegan. You came from basically probably a similar place than we did. I mean, my whole life I love to eat hamburgers and steaks and eggs and sausages and all these things, and dairy. I was a huge dairy head, so if I can give all that up, I think probably anybody could, because I was big time carnist.
That's a good perspective to remember that it's not an us versus them. It's just everyone was probably raised this way, and it's just down to you how you choose what you choose in the grocery store, whether you're going to choose the death option or the compassionate plant-based option. So yeah, you can do it. Start today. No more excuses. Just yeah, definitely. I think this has been a great interview, man. I'm so glad that we were able to find the time to do this, and I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy this one. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming on, man.
Well, I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing, Vegan FootSoldier, and thanks to all your supporters and your subs who who have a lot of input and who make your channel even a better channel. And thanks to everybody out there who is striving to make the world a better place by going and living vegan.